I see a lot out there that expectations high for year 2 with Jackson Chourio. Yeah, he set the bar high last year, but are we expecting too much for his second season with the Brewers? We'll get to that coming up next here on Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Boy, you can't even begin to count up all the great moments that Jackson Chourio had with the Milwaukee Brewers. Postseason, regular season, he did it all. He was the one guy you could count on last year and probably exceeded all our expectations, at least for year 1. Now, going into year 2, seen some crazy things out there regarding expectations for his sophomore season. What is he going to do for an encore? We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. Our guest today, Kyle Lobner, he is joining us. He covers the Milwaukee Brewers for a number of different outlets, including the Shepherd Express, works for the Timber Rattlers, does some post-game podcast stuff with them as well, game day stuff. We'll talk to him coming up here in a little bit. Want to let you know that our show is brought to you, as always, by a bunch of terrific folks, including FanDuel. Big upsets, the game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers getting $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win that $5 bet. Guaranteed win or lose. Win or lose, you're going to get $200 into your account. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Get started with Kyle Lobner. Kyle, appreciate it. It's been a while since we've had you on. Thanks for coming on. Hope you're enjoying your Wisconsin winter.
Oh, always, of course. It's a good time to be inside talking Brewers.
It is, isn't it? It isn't. They have the arbitrations numbers and all that coming up. And before we get to Jackson Chourio, this offseason, what's your read on this so far? Devin's gone. Rhys Hoskins picked up the option on his deal. Obviously, the Adames trade. Not a lot has come our way so far.
I was going to say that right now the biggest question, the offseason question for the Brewers is when does it start? That it feels like the Brewers, with the exception of the Devin Williams trade, have kind of been waiting for something this winter. I'm not sure what that might be. And so, yeah, you would think that this team probably isn't done yet. And history of the current administration would tell us that they're really not done until opening day and maybe not after that. But yeah, it's been a pretty quiet winter. It's been, I had to do a double check to make sure I hadn't missed any news before I came on today. And that the list of news there has been this winter has been relatively brief.
It has. It's been brief, very little. When arbitration numbers are the top story so far for 2025, it's been a dead year. I'm going to ask you a little bit here, some more stuff about the Milwaukee Brewers regarding offseason and maybe if we should expect a thing or two to come. But Jackson Chourio, just been reading a lot of stuff, Kyle, about Jackson Chourio. In the Journal Sentinel the other day, when they were listing their top 5 or 6 expectations or things that could come, not expectations, but things that could happen. And they listed maybe Jackson Chourio finishing in the top 5 at MVP. And there's a lot of that out there. And he's getting a lot of accolades, and I get it. But are we piling too much onto the kid, the 20-year-old kid going into his sophomore season here?
Yeah, I think it's right to be excited about Jackson Chourio and what he did as a 20-year-old and what that projects for over the course of his career. But Jackson Chourio is going to turn 21 in March. He would be one of the younger guys on the Brewers list of top prospects if he was still a top prospect. I think it might be probably a little too early to start talking about the next step for him. I think realistically, if he could have a 2025 season where he just kind of skips the sophomore slump and has his 2024 season all over again, that would be a pretty outstanding thing for this Brewers team. But the flip side of that is that, when you mentioned we were going to talk about Chourio today, I pulled up his Baseball Savant page. And one of the reasons guys tend to have sophomore slumps is because teams figure them out a little bit. Teams start to recognize pitches they don't hit well or start to, spot weaknesses in their game. And I was looking at Chourio's performance against various pitches. And when you look at what he hit against fastballs, what he hit against sinkers, what he hit against slide ups, change ups, curveballs, it's all pretty much the same across the board. And so I don't know, Major League front offices are run by people who spend much more time doing this than I did just now. But with that said, I don't see the glaring weakness that teams are going to exploit. in another year for Jackson Chourio. And so, assuming he can stay healthy and assuming he had a productive offseason, I think there's reason to believe that he's on pace to be pretty good, at least as good as he was in 2024 again. Now, does that put him in the top 5 in the MVP conversation? No, it doesn't. And I think it would take an elite season for a 21-year-old to put himself in that conversation.
Yeah, there's pitching coaches and there's analytic guys who are analyzing everything as we speak. That Jackson Chourio, that maybe didn't happen 20 years ago. There's more things, and it's up to Jackson. I've always said this, and I said this with Terang and the rest of those young guys a few years ago. It's up to them then to make the adjustment to what other people are doing against them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we saw, one of the pieces I'm probably going to have for Shepherd Express in the next few weeks is looking at some of the guys who had, less exciting rookie seasons with the Brewers and the adjustments that it's reasonable to expect them to make. A year ago, we talked about Bryce Terang in that light as a guy who had an opportunity to make adjustments to the Major League game as he saw it, and he came out and did. And so, yeah, it's a challenge to try to figure out. We know more about these guys. We know more about these guys as members of the public than we ever did before. And Major League front offices know exponentially more about them than we do. And so there's a lot of data out there kind of moving around, and the teams that make the best adjustments are the ones that succeed.
Ryan Braun, Rookie of the Year, just phenomenal in 2007. Even his numbers came down in 2008 in moments, but they did naturally are going to come out. He set the bar so high in 2007. Chourio didn't quite do what Braun did in 2007, but there was a lot of special things that he did as far as big moments, and we saw what we did in the postseason.
Well, Chourio was a better all-around player in 2024 than Braun was in 2007, because Braun was still playing third base at that point in 2007, and not particularly well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's, anytime you get a guy who comes up to the big leagues for the first time, it's going to take teams a little while to make an adjustment to him, even when, like I said, they know more about him now from a nuts and bolts perspective than they knew about Braun 20 years ago, or than we knew about anybody back then. And so, yeah, it's always a matter of making adjustments. But I think to take a look at what Chourio did and to project it just for 20% more year over year forever for a guy who was a really productive player as a 20-year-old is probably the best case scenario. It's probably not a reasonable expectation.
He's got a lot of confidence. We've heard from other players about that. And that's what he's really got going for him. Not overconfident, but he feels good about himself. And you have to have that you have to have that at any level of sports.
Absolutely. And I think I'll be curious to see, how the level of success that he's had kind of changes his temperament a little bit as they go forward. I know there was stuff written during the year about Willie Adames and Wilson Contreras being really great, or William Contreras rather, being really great influences on him. Adames now is gone. And so how does that impact his life day to day? There's a lot that can change for a 20-year-old. I don't know how I would have handled being this successful when I was 20 years old, certainly. And so there's a lot that can happen. And so certainly there's a lot to be excited about here, and he's going to be a Brewer for a very long time and hopefully continue to progress up. It's just a question of, where the tripping points are along the way and how they respond when they get there.
Well, we do know he's going to be very, very good, and he's got all the talent. We'll just, I just like to pump the brakes a little bit on all the MVP talk about Jackson Chourio for next year, because if he doesn't live up to it, people are like, oh, what's wrong with Jackson?
Well, and you and I have both been around and following this team long enough to remember when that conversation was going on about Jeff Jenkins and Corey Hart. Everybody needs something to write about in January and February. And sometimes separating the hype from the reality is one of the things that comes with being a Brewer fan for a long time.
We return with more with Kyle Lobner from the Shepherd Express. We're going to ask him a few other things about the closer's role. What happens to MeGill if he doesn't get the job done? We'll talk about that coming up next. Chuck Freeman, Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Good to have you along here. And man, we are here early January talking Brewers baseball with you here on Locked On Brewers, and that is a great thing. Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Game time. That's where I get my tickets, Brewers tickets. But here in the offseason, if I want to go see some college basketball up the road at Madison, down in Milwaukee, see Marquette play. Hey, you know what? I go to Gametime. Concerts, you name it, theater, comedy, whatever you want. And there's so many terrific venues around the state of Wisconsin. They're all here on Gametime. Make your day memorable. Get your tickets, great tickets on Gametime. So many different options. And all you have to do is toggle one switch. It's going to give you all the pricing up front, so you're not going to get any surprises at the end. And my advice is always, hey, game time on game day is a good thing because those prices start dropping, and Gametime, you could be right there to get a winner. Man, I'll tell you, about an hour before concert, if you want to take that gamble, or before a game, those prices sometimes drop. And then take the guesswork out of buying tickets at Gametime when you download the Gametime app, create an account, use that promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, $20. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? It is Gametime. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Kyle Lobner joining us right now. The Shepherd Express, great to get him aboard here. I don't have the graphic up. I know you're on Blue Sky right now. Do you have that Blue Sky account that you can relay? I know it's a long one. I tried to put it up here, and I can't figure out how to do that just with our new graphics just yet.
So I'm still learning how Blue Sky works, I think, as a lot of folks are over the last few months, but my handle stayed the same. It is still by Kyle Lobner, so you can find me there on Blue Sky. I've been pretty happy so far with the engagement I've gotten there, and I think more people are actually seeing my posts on Blue Sky for a relative handful of followers than we're getting it on Twitter. So I'm excited to ride this out and see where it goes. But for now, I'm riding the wave of the new thing.
Yeah, I saw you put that on some sort of social media. I think it was Facebook the other day. All right, let's talk about MeGill. Only blew 2 saves last year. Mm-hmm. He's going to get the first chance at closing out games with Devin Williams now in New York.
Yeah, and I think there's reason to believe that the Brewers have found, another really great potential late inning reliever. This is a thing they've been able to do on the relative regular over the last few years. And it's always a question with these guys of can they stay healthy in the role of a closer, which is, something that the human body just wasn't designed to do. Kind of the irregular routine that they go through. Mm-hmm. But with that said, I think there's reason to be optimistic about how that'll work out. It's probably not as much of a reason to be optimistic as it would be if MeGill was still pitching behind Devin Williams, which would have been an even better bullpen. But with that said, I think there's reason to pencil MeGill in there and assume it'll be okay, at least in the short term. It's just a matter of having enough pieces behind him to have a plan if it's not.
Who's the fallback plan? Uribe? Well, he's coming back, knee surgery. Who's the fallback there?
Well, and that's exactly the question. I don't know that I have an answer for that. And I think the thing that comforts me in moments like this where I don't know the answer to that is that if we had answered that question, even with all the information we had available in April, pretty much every year that I have followed this team, it wouldn't have been what it is by June. The Brewers have been willing to kind of mix and match and fit pieces in and try things out and move on when it doesn't work in the bullpen for a long time. Mm-hmm. That's one of the successes of the Matt Arnold era and going back to the David Stearns era. And so, not knowing exactly what this bullpen is going to look like in April to me isn't the end of the world. It is just a question of having enough options to be able to mix and match pieces.
That's funny because with the Milwaukee Brewers, I feel like somebody goes down, somebody gets hurt, they trade somebody. Oh, what are we going to do? Seems like somebody always rises to the occasion.
Right.
Or goes down or whatever. Tobias Myers rises. There's always a solution with these guys.
Well, I think that the Brewers have been kind of on the cutting edge for a long time in terms of being able to identify pitchers that can step in and help them. And they find them from a wide array of places. I think about guys that came through during my time with the Timber Rattlers. Guys who came up to the Brewers, and I look back and I didn't even remember they were Timber Rattlers because they came in and they pitched 4 games coming out of indie ball, mm-hmm. and then they moved up, and then these guys turn into viable big leaguers. The Brewers have a real knack for determining who can do that and getting them opportunities. And so finding depth of talent has never been the issue. Finding that guy who can be the top talent sometimes has been more of a challenge.
Well, you've seen Mizorowski.
I have.
Is the time now for him?
I wish I had gotten to see him more last year because I saw him as a Timber Rattler now 2 years ago. When the stuff was outstanding, the command was only okay, if okay, and the outings were extremely brief. And so, you watch him pitch a couple times and you can see what's there to dream on.
Yeah.
But I didn't get a chance to see, for example, what it looked like when he worked 6 innings in 2024 in a game. Now, with the evolution of what it means to be a starting pitcher, the Brewers may not ask him to ever go 6 innings in a game. With that said, I'd like to see it. I think certainly he has to be in consideration for a role, because if you're not going to consider him for a role, then what have they been doing? Getting people hyped up for him all of this time. It doesn't seem like there's anybody blocking his path right now. It doesn't seem like, there's somebody else that they're going to miss out on if they decide to go with him. So yeah, I'd really like to see what this looks like at the big league level. I am confident he can get batters out. I would be very curious to see if he can get batters out in extended work, and I'll be curious to see if he can do it outing after outing for a long season.
I wonder if they'll bring him along slowly. There's so many guys out in that bullpen right now, but when a guy throws 100, there's always room for a guy who throws 100.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it might mean displacing another guy who throws 100, given the way the Brewers have brought up talent the last few years. But yeah, it's not just that Mizorowski throws 100. It's that he throws 100 with good stuff.
Yep.
Now, it's been a question of, can he avoid doing things like walking 4 guys in a row while he's throwing 100, because nobody cares how hard you threw ball 4. But with that said, yeah, it seems like this is a guy who at some point in the near future they need to take a look at. And if they do decide that they'd like it to be June or July, and they bring him up slow in April and May so that his inning count is, still relatively available when he gets to the big league level, that might be a good fit for them also.
I love the kid Uribe. I missed half the season. God, I wish I would have been around last year. Last week, we left Uribe, hurt his knee, and he got a little bit of a brawl. He's going to face a suspension when he gets back, a short-term one. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I think, it's, again, you can see what there is to dream on, because the stuff is clearly there and you can't teach that. Well, actually, you can teach that more than you used to be able to, but you still can't get somebody to that point. But when you look at, the variety of questions he is going to have to answer now, as a guy who basically played his way off the field in a brawl, then immediately got hurt. There's a lot of pieces that kind of need to fit back into place before he fits in on this roster. When you've got a guy with that much raw talent, I'm sure the Brewers will give him every opportunity to get there. But I'm curious to see what that road looks like, because it's not just that there was one issue as he was coming down the stretch. It was that he was struggling a little bit on the mound, and he got into an ugly incident, and he got hurt. What does the recovery process from all of that look like?
Is the time now for Aaron Ashby? We'll ask Kyle about that coming up next. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Get us on Google, Spotify, Apple, wherever you download your podcast. You also can get me on Twitter, Chuck Freeman, FREIMUND. Please go to our YouTube page, our growing YouTube page, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That alerts you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. Man, there's NFL games going on this weekend, 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, 1 on Monday. The college football playoffs coming up later on tonight continue. And is there a better time to get in on FanDuel right now? You could bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you got to do is bet the $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Used to be you had to win the $5 to get the $5 to win the bonus money. Now, doesn't matter if you win or lose, you're going to get $200 putting into your account, says FanDuel. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for the live betting. You're watching the games this weekend, live betting. Hey, there you go. Maybe you see Buffalo, who's the 9-point favorite, 9.5-point favorite. Denver takes the early lead. Maybe you like the Bills getting better odds at that point. Well, FanDuel is just perfect for that. FanDuel.com. Join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com. And I'm telling you, the live play-by-play that's on their live betting is perfect. Absolutely perfect. And you're going to dig their live betting. But it's just not NFL. They have everything. Of course, baseball season is in that too. But get in on all the action. The NFL playoffs, though, are better with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com today. Again, get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. And there he is, Kyle Lobner, joining us right back here from the Shepherd Express. Also does a ton of stuff with the Timber Rattlers. And every time I'm in the summer, I'm driving down 41 and I'm heading up to Green Bay. When I see the lights on, I always look longingly at the field over there. And I'm like, man, that'd be sure fun to be over there when I'm taking my kid to his Little League game on a Saturday afternoon. But, yeah, you guys do some great things. Rob Zerjoff has been a longtime friend. Man, I love me some Timber Rattlers. And you know what I think is so cool is that the fact that if there's somebody rehabbing with the Milwaukee Brewers, you guys get a glimpse of them for the fans of the Fox Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the list of names that have passed through Appleton on their way to the big leagues is kind of a who's who of the Brewers organization right now. But the list of guys that have come back to Appleton and been able to play there has also been really impressive. And it's been a really great partnership for everyone involved. It started, before my time there. I've been there a decade now. But it certainly has been a very big deal for all involved. I think it's been really great for the Brewers to be able to sign guys up there and to be able to see them so close to home.
Oh, Kyle, he froze. He was just about to make a good point, and Kyle's internet froze. Oh, we lost Kyle. Boy, Kyle, who lives up in the Appleton area, he froze, so we'll leave him at that, man. The internet froze. But I was going to ask him about Ashby, and I'll tell you about Ashby. Ashby's time is right now. His time is right now, whether it's in the bullpen or closing out games or starting games. Ashby's game is right now. He's not. I don't look at him as a closer, although he's got some closer stuff. But there's other options I like better than him as far as closing. But either as a starter, I like to see him get a start. I like to see him make a run at a starter's job. They spent some money on him a couple of years ago, and the time is now for Ashby. This is now. I've heard enough of the hype about him. He needs to be productive on this team, and not only for himself to get his career going, but to help out the team that signed him, the Milwaukee Brewers. So I want to see Ashby, and I was going to ask him about that, about Ashby, about his future with the Milwaukee Brewers. I still think he's got a great future ahead of him. We saw him last year in September, had terrific stuff. We need to have him stay healthy and a few other things as well. I get a lot of criticism, by the way. The third base spot, I talk about the third base spot on the Milwaukee Brewers. And I got a few of you guys coming after me because I wasn't a big fan of what the Brewers got back in return for Devin Williams. I think Corbin, when I mentioned he's 5'6", okay, some of you guys come after me, well, I don't like it because he's 5'6". No, I'm just not ready to anoint that guy as a starter in the infield just yet. And I don't know why. There's a lot of you guys who think Durbin is going to be the answer. Or at third base? I don't think so. I have to see more of it, and certainly not third base. He played second base, and they're not. I don't see a situation where they're playing him at second base and moving Terang to short and Ortiz the third. I don't see that happening. I still think the third base spot, and I know some of you messaged me about that you don't want to see Frelick over at third base. I think he's still their best option over at third base. He's their best option at third base. It would not surprise me if we still see a move to come for the Milwaukee Brewers. I guess it would surprise me, wouldn't it? But I don't think the Brewers are going into spring training status quo where we are on the infield. I still don't. Feel like there's another move to be made. I still think they got some assets in the outfield, maybe in the minor leagues. I saw somebody mention Bichette. Don't think that's happening. with the Blue Jays. But I could see the Brewers somehow spinning off a move, either signing somebody who's still out there and whose price has dropped. But I feel they're not going into the offseason, or they're not going into opening day with what the options they have for third base right now. I don't see it. That's going to do it. Thanks to everybody for joining it. Thanks for Kyle for joining us as well on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Chuck Freeman, Kyle Lobner. You read his stuff in the Shepherd Express, and, of course, the stuff he does for the Timber Rattlers as well. Class A team, terrific up the road on Highway 41. Thanks for making us your first listen to every day here on Locked On Brewers. For the second listen, go to Locked On MLB. My guy Sully's got all the hot stove league. See you on Monday. Chuck Freeman, Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Get us on YouTube. Search YouTube, Locked On Brewers. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. And, of course, Google, Spotify, Apple, on audio platforms everywhere. Locked On Brewers is there. Have yourself a great weekend, everybody.